30 minutes, $100 million disaster. This paragraph means they agree to all of our original terms, but you have to sign it right here.
You just saved this entire company.
30 minutes, $100 million. The millionaire was in panic without a translator, until the cleaning lady solved it in 1 minute and surprised everyone. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Mr. Matthews, the force majeure clause should exclude typhoons, but in the English version, they are included as your responsibility. The voice of Japanese executive Tanaka exploded through the speakerphone, furious and desperate. The clause, English prevails, is causing a huge misunderstanding. The red digital clock on the wall glowed like a time bomb. 7 p.m. The Miami sunset painted the sky orange, while Adrian Matthews, CEO of Matthews International, was sweating in front of 10 executives, in total panic. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of despair. 3 translators had canceled at the last minute. The 4th was stuck in traffic, and the $100 million penalty was approaching like a financial tsunami. The company's old fax machine started spitting out pages full of strange symbols that looked like abstract art. 10 men in suits stared at the papers as if they were jurors at a modern art contest, trying to decide if it was genius or pure madness. Does anyone understand these little sticks? The vice president asked, pointing at the letters as if they were a secret code. They're Japanese characters, not little sticks, you ignoramus, someone muttered in the back. Another employee grumbled even lower. Hieroglyphs are from Egypt? Genius. These are Japanese kanji. 7:05 p.m., 25 minutes left until the deadline. That's when she appeared. Grace Miller was pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway, humming softly as if she were in another world. Curly brown hair tied with a colorful band, blue cleaning uniform, pink rubber gloves, and a smile brighter than the company's LED lights. That floor was supposed to be empty at that hour. But the loud voice of the CEO caught her attention. She stopped at the door when she heard the shouting in English and Japanese mixed together. Matthews's voice echoing words like typhoons, 100 million, and English prevails. She frowned and tilted her head, curious, like someone stumbling upon a soap opera in the final episode. She thought twice. They looked like they were in real trouble. Did the CEO even speak Japanese? I need to see this up close. From the doorway, Grace saw panic stamped on the executives' faces. One whispered, "Where's the translator?" Another murmured, distressed, "We're going to lose 100 million. Only a few minutes left." The red clock flashed like a sentence. The air felt heavy with despair. That's when she walked in like a hurricane, only instead of destruction, she brought the solution. She grabbed the fax papers without asking permission. "Wow, what a mess," she said, analyzing the pages. "This is kanji, and it's mistranslated." The silence in the room was uncomfortable. 10 executives stared at the cleaning lady as if she had recited a KRSP in Morse code. Adrian blinked twice. "You understand Japanese?" "Yes, I do. This contract says you'll pay for typhoons when it should say you're exempt. Someone translated it wrong and now the Japanese think the bill is yours." Grace shook her head, laughing softly. "Amateurs, 7:10 p.m. 20 minutes left. Chopsticks are for sushi," she continued, ignoring the shocked faces. "To save $100 million, we use kanji. Do you want to lose all that money, or do you want me to dictate the correction?" Adrian felt his chest tighten. He didn't know if it was relief or her green eyes taking his breath away. "Write the bilingual addendum, now." Grace sat in the $2,000 leather chair as if it were a living room sofa. She picked up Adrian's Mont Blanc pen and began translating and correcting with the speed of a roadrunner on the run. "Breathe, boss," she said without looking up. "It's not the contract that needs air right now, it's you." 7:15 p.m. The executives watched in awe as she wrote perfect Japanese characters interlaced with flawless legal English. 7:20 p.m. Grace finished and handed over the pages. Done. Force majeure excludes natural disasters including typhoons, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Now they can't charge for the damage from September's storm. 7:25 p.m. The fax was sent. 7:28 p.m. The phone rang. Matthews-san perfect. Misunderstanding resolved. Contract approved. Tanaka's voice was radiant. Adrian looked at Grace as if she were a goddess, who who had just stepped down from Olympus. She stood up, slipped the pen into his suit pocket, and smiled. "Who are you?" he asked, still in shock. "Grace Miller. The woman who cleans hallways and sometimes problems. Do you need a receipt?" She started to leave the room, but Adrian followed her down the hallway. His heart was pounding harder than the deadline that had just passed. Because Grace Miller wasn't just a cleaning lady. And he was about to find out that saving $100 million would be the least of his problems. Adrian couldn't believe that the woman in a blue uniform had just saved his company. Grace walked down the hall as if she hadn't just solved a $100 million problem. "Wait," he said, still trying to process what had happened. "I need to thank you. You just saved me from a financial disaster." Grace stopped and turned, smiling in a way that scrambled every logical thought in his head. "Relax, boss. It wasn't a big deal. Just a little translation issue." "Little?" Adrian laughed, still in disbelief. "Where did you learn Japanese like that? Harvard? Yale?" "Mrs. Sato." Grace leaned against the wall of the empty corridor, her eyes shining. "My Japanese neighbor. She taught me since I was a kid." The hall was silent, only the buzz of the lights and the distant sound of Miami traffic below. Adrian stepped closer, genuinely curious. "Mrs. Sato used to say, kanji is drawing with a soul," Grace continued, moving her hands as she spoke. "Every symbol tells a story. It's not just a letter. It's art with meaning." "And you passed the proficiency test?" "Level 1. The test was easier than cleaning coffee stains out of a carpet." Grace laughed. "Mrs. Sato was prouder than my own mom." Adrian felt something stir in his chest. There was a sweetness in her that contrasted with the unshakable confidence she had shown minutes earlier. "Say something in Japanese," he asked, not even sure why. Grace gave him a playful smile. "Anata wa totemo hansamu desu." "What does that mean?" "That you're lucky to have found me today." She winked, lying without hesitation. Adrian laughed. "I'm pretty sure that's not it." "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What matters is that today interpreting those drawings saved your contract." At that moment, Adrian's phone rang. The screen read, "Legal. Urgent confirmation. Matthews here. Sir, we just received the official confirmation. The penalty has been suspended. The contract is valid with the corrections. You did it." Adrian hung up and looked at Grace, who was cleaning her nails as if she had only dusted off a table. "We did it," he corrected. "We did it together." "I know." Grace smiled. "That's why I deserve a promotion, or at least a decent coffee machine in the break room." They looked at each other a second longer than what would normally pass between a CEO and an employee. A second that felt like an eternity. Adrian found himself noticing her green eyes, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, the curls escaping from her colorful headband. "Grace, His phone vibrated again, urgently. "A message from the board, emergency board call, now." Adrian looked at the screen, then back at Grace. "Sorry, emergency, but would you come with me? To the boardroom?" Grace hesitated. She looked at her blue uniform, then at his flawless suit. "I don't know if that's a good idea, boss. CEO and cleaning lady in the same meeting? People will think the world's upside down." "Maybe the world needs to be upside down," Adrian said, not realizing the weight of his own words. Grace studied him for a moment. There was something different about this CEO. He wasn't the typical man in a suit who treated employees like furniture. There was sincerity in those brown eyes. "All right," she finally said, "but if they ask about my experience in boardrooms, I'll say I've cleaned plenty of them." Adrian smiled. "Deal." They walked side by side toward the elevator. Adrian pressed the button for the executive floor, but he couldn't stop thinking about how Grace had entered his life like a storm. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they waited for the elevator. "Go ahead." "Why didn't you tell me before that you spoke Japanese?" Grace laughed. "You never asked. Besides, when was the last time a CEO talked to the cleaning crew about hobbies?" "Touché." The elevator arrived, and the doors opened, revealing a mirrored, luxurious interior. Grace stepped in, looked at her own reflection, and sighed. "I hope they don't expect me to talk about the Japanese market. My specialty is more domestic problems." "Today you proved that domestic problems and international contracts aren't that different." "True. Both need precise translation and infinite patience." The elevator doors closed, and Adrian couldn't help but smile. Grace Miller was the most intriguing person he had met in years. But as they rode up to the executive floor, Neither of them imagined that this meeting would change everything, and that some corporate secrets can be more dangerous than any $100 million penalty. The elevator stopped on the 20th floor like a sentence. Adrian took a deep breath, but Grace seemed calmer than he was. The small boardroom was freezing, lit by cold lights that made everyone look like characters in a suspense movie. Around the mahogany table, 5 men in suits waited with funeral faces. Victor Adams, the lead investor at Matthews International, tapped his fingers on the table like an impatient clock. His gray hair was perfectly combed, his blue eyes as cold as ice, and his smile never reached them. "Adrian, we need to talk about image stability," Victor said before any greetings. "The investors are nervous. We need something that shows confidence." Grace stayed quietly in the back, pretending to organize some papers but paying attention to every word. "Stability?" Adrian sat down, suspicious. "The company is doing well. We just closed the Japanese contract." "This isn't about business, young man. It's about your personal life." Victor slid a folder across the table. "Camilla White, CEO of White Holdings, Harvard graduate, traditional family, impeccable connections." Adrian opened the folder and saw photos of a stunning blonde woman, a magazine smile, and blue eyes sharp as jewels, hiding secrets. "Victor, what exactly are you suggesting?" "An engagement. Strategic. Investors love CEOs with stable lives, married, trustworthy." Victor spoke as if selling an insurance policy. "Camilla already agreed. It's a deal that benefits everyone." Grace almost dropped the papers. Her eyes widened like someone who just saw a credit card bill. "This isn't love. It's an arranged marriage with stock charts," Adrian answered, his voice tense. "It's smart business. You two are perfect on paper, move in the same social circles, and she understands that marriage is also a corporate partnership. And if I don't want it?" Victor leaned forward, his tone shifting into something more threatening. "The investors need guarantees, Adrian. Your company depends on our money. Without personal stability, they might pull their support." Grace bit her lip. This conversation was getting messy faster than a mall restroom. "If it's an impossible deal, I'd rather have the truth," Adrian said, standing up. "The truth doesn't pay dividends," Victor shot back. "Think carefully. You have 1 week." Adrian stormed out of the room, slamming the door. Grace followed him down the hall, trying to process what she'd just heard. "Hey, boss," she said, catching up to him near the elevators. "Are you okay?" Adrian stopped and looked at her. After that bizarre meeting, her green eyes seemed like an oasis in the middle of a corporate desert. "You heard all that?" "Hard not to. The man talked like he was selling stock on the marriage exchange." Grace crossed her arms. "If that engagement were a clause, I'd check suspicious." Adrian laughed for the first time since leaving the meeting. "You have a very unique way of seeing things. It's just that I don't get these rich people. Arranged marriage? What century is this? 1500? Victor controls 40% of the company. If he pulls the investment, the company collapses," Grace finished. "I get it. Fancy blackmail." "Exactly." They stood in silence for a moment. Grace studied his face, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the frustration in his brown eyes. "Can I say something without getting fired?" "Go ahead." "You don't seem like the type who gives in to blackmail. Even fancy blackmail." Adrian looked at her curiously. "How do you know that?" "Because you let me save your contract instead of throwing me out for crashing your meeting. You're not like those tie-wearing sharks." "Grace," he said suddenly, "could you help me with something?" "Freelance. Review our emails with Japanese clients." Grace looked at him, thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. "Deal." At that moment, the boardroom door opened and Victor stepped out, followed by a woman who looked like she had walked straight out of a fashion magazine. Platinum blonde hair, a white dress that cost more than Grace could ever imagine in her bank account, and a smile that was pure marketing strategy. Camilla White. She walked toward Adrian with the confidence of someone closing a deal, not winning a heart. "Adrian, darling," Camilla said, her voice sweet as artificial sugar. "Victor told me about our opportunity." Grace watched the scene like someone sitting through a horror movie. Camilla greeted Adrian with 2 kisses on the cheek, but her blue eyes scanned every detail of his interaction with the woman in the blue uniform beside him. "Camilla, this is Grace Miller," Adrian said, not really knowing why. "She works here." "How cute," Camila replied, looking Grace up and down as if evaluating used furniture. I love your uniform. Grace smiled back. Thanks. I love your marriage contract. The air grew tense, like traffic on Ocean Drive during a holiday. Camila blinked twice, her smile fading for just a second. Adrian hid a laugh with a cough. Well, Camila quickly recovered. Adrian and I have a lot to discuss about our future. Excuse us. She pulled Adrian by the arm, but he resisted for a moment, looking at Grace. We'll talk later, he said. Grace nodded. Of course. I'll be here, cleaning up the mess. As Camila dragged Adrian down the hallway, Victor stayed still, watching. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. Find everything about Grace Miller. Name, address, family, debts, everything. He sent the message and smiled, because Victor Adams never left anything to chance, and Grace Miller had just become a problem that needed to be solved. The morning after the freelance deal, Grace Miller proved that saving $100 million had only been the warm-up. At 7 a.m., she was at Matthews International, reviewing bilingual emails that looked like linguistic time bombs. Mr. Nakamura wants to confirm if delivery schedule means delivery timeline or birth schedule, she muttered, fixing the disastrous automatic translation. Google Translate, you're a public danger. Adrian arrived at the office and found Grace at the reception desk computer, surrounded by dictionaries covered with handwritten kanji. You're here early, he said, surprised. I'm right on time. Your emails were causing a diplomatic crisis. Grace showed him the screen. The system translated net profit as fishing profit. The Japanese thought you were selling fish. Adrian laughed. How long have you been here? Since I discovered that machine translation has no soul. Grace saved the last corrected email. Done. Now your Japanese partners know you sell software, not salmon. Coffee? Adrian asked, grabbing his keys. I know a nice place in Wynwood. Grace hesitated. The boss and the cleaning lady having coffee? HR will have a fit. HR doesn't need to know. It's just coffee. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in an artsy cafe in the heart of Wynwood, surrounded by colorful murals and the smell of Colombian coffee. Morning light streamed through the large windows, creating an atmosphere far different from cold corporate offices. Tell me more about Mrs. Sato, Adrian said, stirring his coffee. Grace smiled, her eyes lighting up. She moved into the neighborhood when I was 7. My mom worked double shifts, so I was alone in the afternoons. Mrs. Sato would invite me over for snacks and to teach me kanji. And why did you learn? Because she said each symbol was like a drawing that held a story, and I loved stories. Grace pulled a worn notebook from her pocket. Look, I still write down new kanji. Adrian flipped through it, impressed by her perfect handwriting. This is art. It's life. Mrs. Sato said that when you understand the drawing, you understand the soul of the word. And does she still live in your neighborhood? Grace lowered her eyes. She passed away last year, pneumonia, but she left me all her books. Adrian felt a pang in his chest. I'm sorry. She used to say that good people don't die, they become history. Every time I use Japanese, she's here. Grace tapped her chest. They stayed quiet for a moment, watching the city wake up through the window. Grace, can I make you an offer? Adrian said, suddenly determined. Depends. If it's an arranged marriage, I'll pass. Adrian laughed. No, it's work, internal freelance, temporary. You'd review all our communications with Japanese clients. Avoid fish. Grace studied him. How much? $20 an hour, part-time. No golden badge? No golden badge. No executive dress code? No executive dress code. Grace held out her hand. Deal, but if anyone asks, I don't buy status, I deliver. They shook hands, and Adrian felt a jolt of electricity run up his spine. Can I ask you something personal? Grace said, not letting go of his hand, making him forget that feeling for a moment. Go ahead. Why don't you want to marry the corporate Barbie? She's everything a CEO should want on paper. Adrian sighed. Because the truth is the most expensive language in the world, and with her I can only pay in lies. And what does that mean? That with you, I speak Japanese without even knowing Japanese. Grace laughed. That doesn't even make sense. It makes perfect sense. At that moment, an elderly lady walked up to their table, smiling. Sorry to interrupt, but you two are a beautiful couple. Can I take a picture? I want to show my granddaughter that true love still exists. Grace and Adrian looked at each other. Before they could protest, the lady had already snapped the photo on her phone. "Thank you, dears. You have that sparkle in your eyes." She walked away, and they burst out laughing at the situation. "I speak Japanese, and I know how to use a fax," Grace said. "But I don't speak the language of explaining to you that we are not a couple." "Maybe we don't need to explain," Adrian said without thinking. Grace looked at him surprised. The mood shifted. It became heavier, filled with possibilities. "Adrian, I know, it's complicated. Complicated as translating poetry. This is impossible." "Impossible, like saving 100 million in 30 minutes? Grace smiled. "Touché." They finished their coffee talking about Mrs. Sato, about translation, about how two people from different worlds had met because of a poorly translated fax. Adrian paid the bill and they walked back to the car, passing by Winwood's colorful murals. Grace stopped to admire a graffiti of a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. "Beautiful," she said. "You are beautiful," Adrian replied, unfiltered. Grace blushed. "Boss." "Adrian? Call me Adrian." "Adrian," she repeated, liking the sound. "We should head back. I still have emails to save." They returned to the office, but something had changed. The picture of the old lady had planted a seed. Their glances lasted longer. Their smiles appeared more often. Grace spent the rest of the day correcting translations, and Adrian kept finding excuses to walk past her desk. When the afternoon ended, Grace put away her little kanji notebook and smiled at Adrian. "Thank you for the coffee, and for the opportunity. Thank you for everything." Grace smiled, unaware that night would change her reputation forever. Because while they were discovering that impossible was just a poorly translated word, Victor Adams was setting his plan in motion. And some photos are worth more than 1,000 words, especially when they fall into the wrong hands. A week later, Grace Miller discovered that the difference between Cinderella and a nightmare is only the time of the party. The Matthews International Gala on the South Beach rooftop looked like a Hollywood movie, but she was about to be painted as the villain in the story. Camera flashes burst like fireworks as CEOs, investors, and socialites moved around with champagne glasses that cost more than the most expensive pair of shoes Grace had ever dared to try on. She was only there because Adrian had insisted, saying she deserved to be present after saving the Japanese contract. "Pretty dress," said a voice sweet as poisoned candy behind her. Grace turned and saw Camilla White, stunning in a golden gown that looked like liquid poured over her perfect body. Her smile was sharp as a razor blade. "Thank you," Grace replied, smoothing the simple black dress she had bought on clearance. "You look beautiful, too." "Thank you, dear. It's Versace. Exclusive collection." Camilla paused deliberately. "Where did you get yours? Target?" Grace felt the sting but kept her smile. "I don't remember. When you don't have a closet the size of an apartment, a label is just a label." "What an interesting philosophy," Camilla laughed, though her eyes stayed cold. "It must be hard to fit into this environment, isn't it? All these social codes, conversations about investments. Actually, it's like cleaning. You spot what's dirty and get it out of the way." At that moment, Victor Adams approached, holding a glass and a predatory smile. "Grace Miller, isn't it?" He extended his hand. "Victor Adams. A pleasure to finally meet you." Grace shook his hand, feeling something slimy behind the forced politeness. "Mr. Adams, I heard you saved our Japanese contract. Such an impressive talent for a cleaning employee." The pause before cleaning employee was venomous. "Talent doesn't have a dress code," Grace replied. Victor laughed. "True, but ambition has a price, and sometimes people do desperate things when they see a chance to climb higher." Grace frowned. "Sorry, I don't understand." "Oh, nothing serious. It's just interesting how some people show up at the right time, save the day, and suddenly are having coffee with the CEO. Victor sipped his drink. "Almost feels planned." "If you're suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything," Victor interrupted, pretending innocence. "Just noticing patterns. Young, ambitious women who see wealthy men as opportunities." Grace felt her blood boil. "I don't chase inheritance. I chase errors in contracts." "Of course not." Camilla jumped in, pretending to defend Grace. "I'm sure your feelings for Adrian are genuine. It's not about his money, right?" The trap was set. Other people started gathering, curious about the tense exchange. "Feelings?" Grace tried to step back. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, dear," Camila laughed too loudly, drawing more attention. Everyone saw you two at the cafe in Wynwood. The photo is already circulating on the company's Instagram. You look so close. Grace felt as if she were falling in an elevator without brakes. The photo of the lady. Someone had posted it. Listen, Grace said, trying to keep her voice down. This is nobody's business. But Camila was already heading toward the microphone in the center of the rooftop, where moments earlier the DJ had stopped the music for toasts. Everyone, may I have your attention? Camila spoke into the microphone, her smile brighter than the spotlights. I would like to introduce the newest consultant at Matthews International, Grace Miller. The spotlights turned to Grace, who stood frozen like a deer in front of a truck. 200 people looked at her all at once. Grace started as part of the cleaning staff and is now consulting directly with our CEO. What an inspiring story of social mobility, don't you think? The crowd murmured. Some chuckled quietly. Grace felt each word like a slap in the face. If etiquette were a contract, this toast would already come stamped with fraud, Grace whispered to herself, trying to keep her composure. And the most romantic thing, Camila continued, is that love can bloom anywhere, even between different social classes. Now the laughter was louder. Phones began recording. Grace saw her humiliation being broadcast live on social media. If I'm going to stumble, I'd rather stumble into the truth, Grace said loud enough for the microphone to catch. The crowd went silent. The truth is that I saved a $100 million contract because no one in this room knew the difference between include and exclude in Japanese. The truth is that you pay fortunes to translators who confuse profit with fishing. Grace walked toward the microphone. And the truth is that I don't need your approval to know my worth. Some people began to applaud, but Camila quickly regained control. How brave, Camila said, sarcastic. But courage doesn't pay bills, does it? Good thing you now have protection. The humiliation was complete. Grace had been painted as an opportunist using Adrian to climb in life. That's when Adrian appeared, pushing through the crowd to reach her. Grace! He tried to get to her, but it was too late. Grace was already walking toward the elevator, her cheeks burning with shame and anger. The party continued behind her, but now with a new subject to gossip about. Adrian managed to reach her at the elevator. Grace, wait, let me explain. Explain what? That I'm tonight's entertainment? The season's joke? Grace pressed the lobby button hard. They turned our coffee into a cheap romantic comedy. That doesn't matter. What matters is... Yammer. Grace's phone vibrated with an emergency notification. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Miami Regional Hospital. Your grandmother Rose has been admitted to the ICU. Come immediately. Grace looked at Adrian, her eyes full of tears she refused to shed. Now you have your answer, she said, as the elevator doors closed between them. The truth is that I never belonged to your world, and maybe that's for the best. The doors closed, leaving Adrian alone in the hallway, while upstairs Victor smiled at Camila. The first phase of the plan had worked perfectly. Grace Miller was out of the game, or at least that's what they thought. Grace tried to be strong, but at 2 a.m, alone in the cold waiting room of Miami Regional Hospital, she realized pride doesn't warm a broken heart. She picked up her phone with trembling hands. Adrian, can you come? Please. 20 minutes later, he came running through the hallways as if trying to catch his own future. He found Grace curled up in a plastic chair, still wearing the party dress, but now with eyes red from crying. How is she? He asked, sitting beside her. Stable. Pneumonia. The doctors say she'll be fine, but... Grace leaned against him without realizing it. She's all I have. That's not true, Adrian said softly. Grace looked at him, confused. What do you mean? You have Mrs. Sato's memory. You have your talent. You have... Adrian hesitated. You have people who care about you. The hallway was empty, only the sound of machines beeping and the hum of fluorescent lights. Grace studied his face, searching for signs of pity or social obligation, but found only sincerity. Why did you come? After all the humiliation, after I walked away. Because tonight I'm not a CEO. I'm someone who stayed when you called. Grace felt her chest tighten. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. You would stay for me. Adrian reached out and held her hand, which was cold with nerves. The warmth of his fingers spread up her arm like an electric current. Staying is my new favorite language, Grace whispered. Adrian smiled for the first time since the party. Better than Japanese? Much better. The distance between them kept shrinking, inch by inch, as if something invisible was pulling them together. Her lips were just inches from his when a nurse appeared in the hallway. Family of Rose Miller? Grace and Adrian quickly stepped apart, their cheeks red like teenagers caught kissing at the movies. I'm her granddaughter, Grace said, standing up. She's awake and asking to see you. You can go in, but only one visitor at a time. Grace entered the room and found her grandmother Rose connected to tubes, but smiling brighter than the hospital lights. Grandma, you scared me. Sorry, dear. These old lungs decided to go on strike. Rose squeezed Grace's hand. Who's the young man outside? It's complicated. True love is always complicated, dear. If it's too easy, that's suspicious. He's my boss, sort of. I don't know. So what? Your grandfather was my dance teacher. Age difference, social class difference, family scandal. But we had 50 years of happiness. Later, when Adrian came in to meet Rose, she looked him over the way someone checks a used car. Your hospital chair is kinder than your boardroom, Rose said, making Adrian laugh. When they left the hospital, the sun was rising over Miami. Thank you, Grace said in the parking lot. For coming, for staying. For almost kissing you? Adrian asked. Grace blushed. For that too. They moved closer again, slowly. This time there were no nurses. Just the two of them and the sunrise painting the sky pink. Can I try again? He asked. You can. They finally kissed, a soft, careful kiss, as if they were signing an important contract. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Better than translating Japanese, Grace whispered. Much better. Adrian drove her home and promised to check on her grandmother later. Grace entered her small apartment, floating as if she had won the lottery. But while Grace slept, dreaming of kisses in the hospital, a photo of them in the parking lot was being sent to Victor Adams. The almost kiss stayed in their hearts. The photo did not, and now it was about to cost dearly. Because in corporate wars, even the purest moments can turn into ammunition. And Victor Adams never played clean. The next morning, Matthews International woke up to the biggest corporate scandal of the year. Victor Adams had turned love into crime, and Grace Miller into a criminal. At 6 a.m, Victor was alone in the office, plugging a blue flash drive into the main computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard like a professional hacker, changing timestamps, altering file histories, planting digital evidence. Clause 7. Unauthorized change, he murmured, editing the original Japanese contract. Modification date, after the official deadline. He inserted codes that made it look like Grace had accessed the company system using Adrian's credentials. A flawless digital forgery. At 8 o'clock, the bomb went off. Corporate scandal. Cleaning lady manipulates $100 million contract to save billionaire lover, screamed the headline of the Miami Business Tribune. Grace arrived at the office as usual, humming softly, unaware that she was walking into a war zone. She found the lobby in dead silence, every employee staring at her as if she were a fugitive. Good morning, she said to the receptionist, who quickly looked away. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Adrian was in the boardroom, surrounded by the directors, with a copy of the newspaper on the table. His face looked like someone who had just discovered the world upside down. Adrian, you need to control this situation, said the chairman, pointing at the headline. The SEC will investigate. The shareholders are panicking. Grace did nothing wrong, Adrian said, his voice tense. The system logs say otherwise, Victor replied, projecting data on the screen. Unauthorized access at 7:15 p.m. on the day of the contract. Clause 7 modification. Her digital signature. Adrian studied the data. It looked real. Technically perfect. But something didn't add up. This doesn't make sense. Grace saved the contract. She didn't sabotage it. Maybe she saved it to look like a hero, Camila suggested, stepping into the room with a fake look of concern. Create a problem and then solve it. Hero syndrome. Or maybe, Victor added, she saw a chance to get close to you through a manufactured crisis. At that moment, Grace appeared at the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Can someone tell me what's going on? She asked. The silence in the room was heavy. Adrian looked at her with an expression that mixed confusion and pain. Grace, I need to ask you something, he said. Did you access the system on the day of the Japanese contract? Of course not. I don't even have access to the system. I wrote the addendum by hand, remember? Victor threw a folder on the table. Then how do you explain this? Grace looked at the documents. System logs, timestamps, access codes, everything looked official. But she knew it was a lie. When the kanji looks too perfect, be suspicious of the translation, she said, studying the papers. This was forged. What do you mean? Adrian stepped closer. The digital signature. Look at the formatting. It's in Times New Roman, but the company system uses Calibri. And the timestamp is in American format, but the hour is European. Grace pointed at the inconsistencies. The lie has a digital signature. Victor started to sweat. He hadn't expected a cleaning lady to recognize data forgery. These are technical details, he said, trying to minimize it. What matters is that there was unauthorized access. There was forgery, Grace corrected. Someone planted this evidence. Camila laughed. Well, how convenient. The accused also happens to be an expert in digital crimes. If gossip were a contract, this one would have more addendums than a soap opera, Grace shot back. But it's not. It's sabotage. Adrian looked at Victor, then at Grace. His mind was working quickly, connecting the dots. Victor, were you here early today? I arrived at 7. Hard work, unlike some people. And why do you have access to the system logs? That's IT's responsibility. Victor hesitated for half a second. It was enough. I have audit rights as the main investor. Grace crossed her arms. How convenient. The sheriff and the bandit are the same person. Enough. The board chairman slammed the table. Regardless of who did what, we need to control the damage. Grace Miller is suspended until further notice. Suspended? Adrian stood up. She didn't do anything. She did. She created a scandal that could cost billions in market value, Victor said, feigning sadness. It's a shame, really. Grace looked at Adrian, seeing doubt in his eyes. For a moment she thought he might defend her. But the weight of the false evidence and the board's pressure were stronger. Grace, Adrian said, his voice breaking, maybe it's best if you stay home until we clear this up. Grace felt as if the truth had pierced her chest like an arrow. You believe them? I need to investigate. There's nothing to investigate. You just need to trust. Grace grabbed her bag. But I guess that's asking too much. She walked out of the room with her head held high, but her heart shattered. Because discovering that love was real was wonderful. Discovering that trust was false was devastating. And while Grace cleared her desk for the last time, Victor smiled discreetly. Phase 2 of the plan, successfully completed. Now it was time for Phase 3. The final elimination. Some goodbyes happen in airports with dramatic music. Others happen in cold steel elevators with the sound of cables straining and hearts breaking. Grace held the temporary badge in her hands as if it were a passport to a country she would never visit again. The elevator went down slowly, each floor passing like a countdown to the end. Adrian slipped in at the last second before the doors closed. Grace, wait. There's nothing to wait for, she said, not looking at him. The board decided. You decided. I didn't decide anything. I just need time to investigate whether the woman you kissed yesterday is a criminal today? Grace finally looked at him. That's fast work, Adrian. 12 hours to decide I'm a fraud. The elevator kept descending. 15 floors, 14, 13. That's not it. The evidence was fake. I explained that. But you preferred to believe a flash drive over me. 12 floors, 11, 10. Adrian saw their reflection in the polished steel walls. He in a wrinkled suit. She in her blue uniform for the last time. Two worlds that touched for a week and were now pulling apart forever. What do you want me to do? Ignore the board? Lose the company? I want you to have courage. Grace pressed the badge against her chest. But courage can't be bought or inherited. You either have it or you don't. 9 floors. 8. 7. Grace, let me help you. I can hire a lawyer, investigate on the side. I don't run from family drama. I just don't turn into a headline. Grace handed him the badge. Here, a souvenir from the week when a CEO almost believed in a cleaning lady. 6 floors. 5. 4. And if I find the truth? If I prove you're innocent? Grace smiled, but it was a sad smile, like a winter sunset. If it's love, it will find me. 3 floors. 2. 1. The doors opened on the ground floor like a mouth swallowing dreams. Grace walked out without looking back. At least the elevator didn't announce the floor of humiliation, she murmured to herself. Adrian stood still, holding her badge, still warm from her hands, as he watched Grace cross the lobby for the last time. The employees looked at her with a mix of pity and curiosity, as if she were a fallen celebrity. At the revolving door, Grace paused for a second and looked back. Adrian was still there, by the elevator, like a statue of remorse. She waved once, he waved back. And then she disappeared into the Miami crowd. Grace went straight to the hospital. She found her grandmother Rose much better, sitting up in bed, reading a magazine. "How was work, dear?" "Change of plans, Grandma. I think I'll visit Aunt Linda in Orlando for a few days." Rose studied her granddaughter's face. 60 years of life had taught her the difference between fatigue and disappointment. "Did he hurt you?" "He let me down. That's different." Sometimes men need time to realize they've lost a treasure. Grace kissed her grandmother's forehead. And sometimes treasures get tired of waiting. 2 hours later, Grace was on a Greyhound bus headed to Orlando, carrying only a backpack and Mrs. Sato's little kanji notebook. Through the window, she watched Miami fade away, along with the most intense week of her life. Meanwhile, Adrian was riding up to the 20th floor like a man going to his own trial. He entered the conference room where Victor and Camila were toasting with champagne. "Problem solved," Victor said, raising his glass. "The company is safe." "Safe from what?" Adrian asked. "From scandals, from opportunistic women, from emotional decisions that cost millions." Adrian walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Grace was disappearing from his life, and he didn't know if he would ever forgive himself. "Adrian," Camila stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know it was hard, but you did the right thing. Now we can focus on our future, on our engagement." "Our engagement," Adrian repeated, as if the words were in another language. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow. We'll make it official." Adrian kept his eyes on the window. "And what if I don't want that anymore?" Victor and Camila exchanged worried looks. "Adrian, you're in an emotional state. That's normal, but you can't let—" Adrian's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Look at the original version of the Japanese contract. Upload date. You'll discover who really lied." Adrian stared at the message, then at Victor, who was visibly nervous. "Excuse me," Adrian said. "I have an investigation to run." Because sometimes the truth comes through anonymous messages. And sometimes it arrives too late. But this time, maybe it wasn't too late to save what truly mattered. If Grace still wanted to be saved. At 3 a.m, Adrian Matthews became a private detective in his own company's IT room. The truth had a digital address, and he was going to find it, even if he had to search every byte on the server. "The truth also carries a timestamp," he murmured, logging into the central system with administrator privileges. The cold glow of the monitors lit up his tired face as he tracked every file related to the Japanese contract. He started with the original history before Grace ever joined the company. What he found was a bombshell. Original version, 6:45 p.m. Translation error confirmed. American translator confused excludes with includes in the force majeure clause, Adrian read aloud. Grace didn't create the problem. She solved one that already existed. He kept digging. Access logs, timestamps, edits, all chronological, all documented. 7:05 p.m. Grace Miller enters the meeting room. 17 p.m. Handwritten addendum created by Grace Miller. 7:28 p.m. Fax sent with corrections. So far everything looked normal, but then he found something that made his blood boil. 11:47 p.m. Remote access via external flash drive. Identification, blue device. User V. Adams. Victor had tampered with the system almost 4 hours after the fax was sent, and he had modified the logs to make it look as though Grace had caused the original problem. "I found the criminal's signature, caps lock," Adrian said, seeing the obvious traces of forgery Victor had left. Amateur. He printed all the evidence, called every board member, and scheduled an emergency press conference on the rooftop for 9 a.m. If English prevails, let the evidence prevail. But first, he needed to find Grace. Adrian drove to the hospital. He found Rose awake, reading a crossword book. "Mr. Matthews, what are you doing here so early?" "Rose, I need to find Grace. It's urgent." "She went to Orlando to visit Aunt Linda." Rose studied his face. "Did you discover the truth?" "I discovered who lied, and it wasn't your granddaughter." Rose smiled. "I knew it. Grace doesn't have the malice to set up a scheme like that. Do you have Aunt Linda's address? Rose wrote the address on a piece of paper. She's at the theme park today, said she was going to think about life while riding the roller coaster. Adrian kissed Rose's forehead. Thank you. I'll bring her back. Bring my granddaughter home, son. 2 hours on the road later, Adrian arrived at Magic Kingdom. He never imagined he would declare his love at a Disney park, but life had other plans. He found Grace in line for Space Mountain, wearing sunglasses and a mini cap, trying to hide from the world. Grace, she turned, surprised. Adrian, how did you find me? Your grandmother. And an all-night investigation. Grace stepped out of the line, hesitant. What do you want? To prove you're innocent, to expose Victor, and most importantly, to apologize for doubting you. They moved away from the crowd, heading toward a quieter area near the castle. Adrian, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm tired of being accused, judged, humiliated. I know, but I need you to come back with me. Why? I told you I was innocent, and you didn't believe me. Adrian showed her the folder with the evidence. Because I discovered who really falsified the data. Victor planted the evidence to frame you. Now I have the proof. Grace looked at the documents. Real logs, true timestamps, a complete history. My God, he really set all this up. The press conference is in 2 hours. I'm going to expose everything, but I want you there, by my side. Grace hesitated. Adrian, even if you prove my innocence, that doesn't solve our problem. What problem? I'm a cleaning woman. You're a CEO. This isn't a fairy tale, it's real life. Adrian took her hands. Grace, you saved my company. You taught me about honesty. You showed me that value has nothing to do with title or bank account. Nice speech, but what about later? When the press gets tired of our romance, when investors question your choice, when your family finds out you're dating the cleaning lady, then we'll face all of it. Together. Grace looked toward Cinderella's castle in the distance. This isn't a Disney movie, Adrian. It isn't. It's better, because it's real. A child ran by, dressed as a prince, shouting to his mother, Mom, I found my princess. Grace laughed in spite of everything. Even kids have more courage than I do. You have courage. You had the courage to correct me in the first meeting. You had the courage to confront me in the hospital. You had the courage to send me away when I let you down. And you? Will you stand by me when the whole world turns against me? Adrian pulled her close firmly. I already chose. It's now. Grace looked into his eyes. She saw determination, sincerity, and something that looked very much like true love. All right, but if this goes wrong, you owe me a ride on Space Mountain. Deal. They ran to the car, leaving the enchanted kingdom behind. But the real fairy tale was just beginning. Because sometimes truth needs a press conference to come out, and sometimes love needs an audience to be declared. 2 hours later, the same South Beach rooftop that had been the stage of Grace's humiliation became the scene of the biggest corporate turnaround of the year. The strong Miami wind shook the microphones as TV cameras prepared for the show. Adrian Matthews stepped up to the podium like a gladiator entering the arena. In the background, Grace watched nervously, beside her grandmother Rose, who had insisted on coming to see my adopted grandson deliver justice. Members of the press, Adrian began, his steady voice cutting through the wind, I am here today to correct an injustice and expose a fraud. Victor and Camila sat in the front row, trying to keep their composure, but sweating more than tourists in August. Adrian turned on the projector. First revelation, the Japanese contract was never sabotaged by Grace Miller. In fact, she saved Matthews International from a $100 million penalty caused by a pre-existing translation error. The screen displayed the original logs, timestamps, and technical evidence. Journalists snapped photos furiously. The original mistake came from the American translator hired by the company, who confused excludes with includes in the force majeure clause. Grace corrected this mistake at 7:15 p.m., saving the contract. Victor tried to stand up. Adrian, this is... I'm not finished, Victor. Adrian clicked to the next slide. Second revelation. At 11:47 p.m. that same day, someone accessed our systems remotely using a blue flash drive and falsified the logs to incriminate Grace Miller. The screen showed irrefutable technical data. The access was made by the user V. Adams. Victor Adams. The rooftop exploded in murmurs. Flashes went off like fireworks. This is absurd, Victor shouted. I will not accept these accusations. These are not accusations. They are proof. Adrian showed more documents. We have digital records of everything: time, user, device, even the brand of the flash drive. Kingston Blue, 32 gigabytes. Victor turned pale. Camilla quietly stepped away from him. I promise I'll learn Japanese, Adrian continued, starting with apology. Grace-san, sumimasen. Grace laughed softly, her eyes filled with tears. Third revelation, Adrian took a deep breath. Grace Miller taught me the hardest language of all, the language of truth. And today, in front of all of you, I choose to speak that language. He stepped down from the podium and walked toward Grace. Grace, will you forgive me? For doubting you? For letting them turn our coffee into a scandal? For being a coward when I should have been brave? Grace wiped her tears. You drove all the way to Orlando to pick me up. I think that counts as courage. Not enough. Adrian knelt right there, in the middle of the rooftop, in front of 50 journalists and television cameras. Grandma Rose murmured, "That boy never does anything halfway." Grace Miller, Adrian said, his voice breaking, you saved my company, changed my life, and taught me that kanji has a soul. I choose to stay. Forever, will you marry me? The rooftop fell silent. Even the wind stopped blowing. Grace looked at him, then at the cameras, then at Grandma Rose, who nodded with encouragement. Are you sure? Because if I say yes here in front of everyone, there's no turning back. I'm sure. And if your family doesn't like me, my family is you now. And if the investors go crazy, let them. Love is not about stock shares. Grace laughed. All right, but with one condition. What is it? No arranged marriage. If we do this, it will be for love, not for contract. Deal. Grace helped him stand. Then yes, I accept. The rooftop exploded with applause. Cameras flashed. Grandma Rose shouted, finally! But in the middle of the celebration, Camilla approached the microphone, trying one last sabotage. How romantic, she said sarcastically. But does Grace really love Adrian, or is she just... Camilla, Grace cut her off, taking the microphone. If you want a man who marries for convenience, I know an unemployed investor who might interest you. The crowd laughed. Victor was quietly escorted out by security. Adrian embraced Grace while reporters shouted questions. The wind returned, but this time it carried promises instead of storms. He took her hand. Can I talk about our contract? What contract? Grace asked. The contract of eternal love, no suspensive clauses, no expiration date, no penalty for early termination. And the terms? Total honesty, daily laughter, and kanji with soul forever. Grace smiled. I accept. But I want it all in writing. In Japanese? In English. The language of the heart. They kissed while Miami watched, and for the first time in weeks, Adrian felt he was exactly where he belonged. But while they celebrated their victory, neither of them realized the real adventure was just beginning. Because getting married is easy. Living happily ever after is the work of two. 6 hours later, the same rooftop felt like another planet. The cameras were gone, leaving only the lights of Miami Bay twinkling like earthly stars, and Adrian discovered that declaring love on television was easier than talking alone with the woman who had just agreed to marry him. Grace leaned against the railing, looking at the city, still processing that she had gotten engaged on live TV. Regrets? Adrian asked, walking up to her. About what? Accepting a marriage proposal from a man who asked without a ring, without planning, and in front of 50 journalists. Grace laughed. What kind of woman do you think I am? The kind I want by my side forever. Grace turned to him. Adrian, I need to talk seriously with you. It started with I need to talk seriously. That's never a good sign. I accept marrying you, but I don't accept being the decorative wife who smiles at events and stays quiet in meetings. Adrian nodded. What else? I want an active voice in the company. If I'm going to be part of your life, I want to be part of your projects too. Fair. What else? I want to create a social program, language scholarships for young workers, in memory of Mrs. Sato. Love, you can create as many programs as you want. Grace smiled. And I want you to stop calling me love in public until we know each other better. Agreed. Grace? What? Choosing you is my lifetime contract. Grace felt her heart race. And the terms? No terms, just choice. Every day we choose to stay. No termination clauses, no penalty, just a kiss if someone's late. Grace laughed. If it's love, we sign every day. At that moment, Grandma Rose appeared on the rooftop, supported by a nurse who had become her best friend at the hospital. "Sorry to interrupt the romantic moment," Rose said, "but I came to give my official blessing. Grandma, you should be resting." "I'll rest when I die. Right now, I want to really get to know my future grandson-in-law." Rose moved closer to Adrian and studied him the way someone smells milk about to turn sour. "Are you going to take good care of my Grace?" "I'll try." "Try is not an answer. Will you or won't you?" "I will." "Will you respect her crazy ideas?" "I will." "Will you handle it when she corrects your Japanese in front of others?" "I will, with pleasure." Rose smiled. "This one's the real deal." The nurse laughed. "Mrs. Rose, you're tougher than a job interview. Because marriage is more serious work than any job." Adrian knelt in front of Rose. "Mrs. Rose, may I officially ask for your granddaughter's hand?" "You may, but with conditions." Grace rolled her eyes. "Grandma?" "First condition, church wedding. Second condition, I choose the bouquet. Third condition, honeymoon in Japan." "Japan?" Adrian blinked. "So you can visit Mrs. Sato's grave. She deserves to meet the man who won the heart of the girl she helped raise." Grace started to cry. "Grandma, that's beautiful, I know." Rose took their hands. "Now promise me one thing." "What?" they both asked together. "Promise you'll argue. A lot, because if you don't argue, you never really know each other." Adrian laughed. "I promise to argue with her at least once a week." "And I promise to win every argument," Grace added. "Perfect. Now take me home. This romance has tired me out more than a soap opera." The nurse started to push Rose's wheelchair, but the grandmother stopped and looked back. "Adrian?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Thank you for going after her. A man who drives 2 hours to apologize is a man worth keeping." When they were alone again, Grace and Adrian looked at each other in the silence of the Miami night. "So," Grace said, "now that we're officially engaged." "Officially engaged," Adrian repeated, liking the sound of it. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How are we going to make this work? A CEO and a former cleaning lady, different worlds, social pressure." Adrian pulled her closer. "We'll figure it out, together, one day at a time. And if it doesn't work, it will." "How can you be so sure?" Adrian pointed to the city below. "Because you taught me that kanji has a soul, and our story does too." Grace smiled. "What story?" "The story of the woman who saved a contract and stole a heart." "I didn't steal it. I won the lottery." They kissed again, with Miami Bay as their witness and the stars as their blessing. When they pulled apart, Adrian whispered, "I have one last announcement." "What announcement?" "Tomorrow morning, I'll officially launch the Dona Sato Institute, language scholarships for young workers." Grace looked at him, surprised. "Really?" "Really, with you as executive director." "Adrian?" "What?" "I guess I really will have to marry you." "Lucky me." But as they sealed the promise with another kiss, neither of them imagined that the biggest challenge was still ahead. Because announcing a wedding is easy. Planning a wedding with Grace's family would be the real adventure. 3 months later, Grace Miller discovered that planning a wedding was more complicated than translating a Japanese contract. But it was worth every second of stress when she saw Adrian waiting at the altar with a smile that outshone the garden lanterns. The ceremony took place in Grandma Rose's backyard, decorated with Japanese lanterns and white flowers. 50 guests, live guitar, and the Miami sunset painting everything in gold. Simple, intimate, perfect. Grace walked down the aisle without a traditional veil, but carrying Mrs. Sato's kanji notebook in her hand. Adrian was nervous, fidgeting with his tie as if it were his first corporate presentation. "Relax," Grace whispered when she reached him. "It's just a lifetime contract. No termination clause," Adrian replied, smiling. The pastor smiled. "Shall we go to the vows?" Adrian took a deep breath. "Grace, you came into my life correcting a translation mistake and ended up translating my whole heart. I promise to choose you every day, argue with you when needed, and learn Japanese without complaining." Grace laughed. "Adrian, you taught me that love has no corporate hierarchy. I promise to correct you with kindness, save your contracts when needed, and never let you forget that kanji has a soul. Our love does too." "Shall we sign?" the pastor asked. "On paper, in kanji, and with a kiss," Grace answered. They exchanged simple rings, kissed to applause, and officially became husband and wife. But the surprise came at the reception. Adrian took the microphone and smiled at the guests. Everyone, Grace and I have an announcement. Am I already pregnant? Grace joked, making everyone laugh. Not yet, Adrian laughed. But today we are officially launching the Dona Sato Foundation. The audience leaned in curiously. Full scholarships in languages for young workers from low-income backgrounds, Portuguese, English, Japanese, Spanish, because talent doesn't have a social address. Grace took the microphone. Mrs. Sato always said that language is a bridge between cultures. We want to build many bridges. The guests applauded with emotion. Grandma Rose quietly wiped away tears. From the back of the garden, a figure watched the celebration. Camilla White, who had come to make peace. She walked up to the couple during dinner. Grace, Camilla said, extending her hand, congratulations. You both deserve to be happy. Grace studied her face, looking for sarcasm, but found only a tired sincerity. Thank you, Camilla, that means a lot. May I say something? Of course. You were right that night. I was trying to buy love instead of earning it. It was pathetic. It wasn't pathetic. It was human. Camilla smiled for the first time in months. Take care of each other, and if you ever need anything. We do, Grace interrupted. Would you like to volunteer at the foundation? Camilla blinked, surprised. Really? You speak 3 languages and know the corporate world. We need people like you. I would love to. As Camilla walked away, Adrian wrapped his arms around Grace from behind. Generous even with former rivals? She wasn't a rival. She was a lost woman trying to find her place. How do you always know what to say? Mrs. Sato taught me, the right words at the right time build bridges. Later, when the guests had gone and only close family remained, Grace and Adrian danced alone in the garden lit by lanterns. The language of truth is our home, Grace sang softly to the tune of the music. It always has been, Adrian replied. Grace looked up at the starry sky. Mrs. Sato, thank you for teaching me that drawings can have a soul, and that some people are worth translating. She's watching, Grandma Rose said, approaching with a cup of tea. And she's proud. How do you know, Grandma? Because a star winked when you kissed. Adrian laughed. Scientifically impossible. Romantically perfect, Grace corrected. They danced until the lanterns went out, whispering promises, planning the future, laughing at inside jokes only 2 people in love would understand. When they walked into the house, Grace stopped at the door and looked back one last time. You know what's funny? What? It all started with a poorly translated fax, and ended with a well-translated love. It didn't end, it began. Adrian lifted her in his arms as they crossed the doorway, laughing like teenagers. Welcome to our life, Mrs. Matthews. Welcome to our love, Mr. Matthews. And as the Miami moon blessed their new family, somewhere in the sky, Mrs. Sato smiled. Because some stories begin with a translation mistake, but end with the heart getting it right. And the best happy ending is the one that's really a new beginning. What did you think of Grace Miller and Adrian Matthews? Leave your opinion in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive more emotional stories like this one. See you next time.